There are some stories that begin with a strange photograph. Some begin with a mysterious disappearance. And some begin with a police response so enormous that people watching from the outside immediately start asking one very simple question. What the hell happened? January 1st, 2024. Miami, Florida. Bayside Marketplace. An outdoor shopping and entertainment complex sitting right on Biscayne Bay in the heart of downtown Miami. It was New Year's Day. People were shopping, eating, drinking, celebrating. And then, sometime after 8 p.m., something happened. People began running. Reports of gunfire started circulating. Police flooded the area. Not a handful of officers, dozens. A citywide emergency response was activated. Traffic was shut down. Armed officers arrived. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, the internet began telling a very different story. Not teenagers, not fireworks, not a fight. Something much taller, something gray, something that, according to some people online, didn't look human at all. Within days, the Miami Mall incident had become one of the strangest viral mysteries on the internet. Some said there had been 8 to 10 foot tall beings walking around Bayside. Others claimed they saw portals. Others talked about strange lights in the sky. There were stories of electronics malfunctioning, claims that police had confiscated phones, claims that footage had been deleted, claims that flights had been grounded. And eventually the theory became even bigger. The government wasn't simply hiding what happened at a shopping mall. They were supposedly hiding an extraterrestrial encounter. But here's where this story gets interesting. Because there really was a massive police response. There really were hundreds of people in the area. There really were fireworks. There really were arrests. And there really are videos from that night. So what happened? Was this simply a case of teenagers turning New Year's Day into absolute chaos? Was the internet transforming shadows into monsters? Or was there something else happening that night that authorities never told us about? Tonight on Stranger Things, we're going to Miami, and we're going to separate the mall incident into 3 different stories. The story police told us, the stories witnesses told the internet, and the story that conspiracy theorists built in the space between them. Because sometimes, the strangest part of a mystery isn't what people saw, it's what happened after they saw it. To understand why this incident became so bizarre, you have to understand the location. Bayside Marketplace is not some isolated warehouse sitting in the Florida wilderness. It's right in downtown Miami. It's busy. It's public. It's surrounded by roads, businesses, hotels, apartments, and tourist attractions. And on New Year's Day it was crowded. Then, shortly after 8 p.m., things started going sideways. According to police and contemporary local reporting, a large group of juveniles became involved in fights around Bayside Marketplace. Fireworks were being set off. Some reports described fireworks being thrown toward people. There were disturbances inside and around the shopping center. And then came the sound that would change the entire evening. Gunshots. Or at least, that's what people thought they heard. Police began receiving calls reporting what sounded like gunfire. And if you're a police dispatcher and multiple people are calling about gunshots at a crowded shopping center, you don't get to assume they're fireworks. You have to treat it like the worst possible scenario. An active shooter. That is the nightmare scenario. So police responded accordingly. The Miami Herald reported that officers initially responded to reports of what callers believed were gunshots. Police later said the sounds were fireworks being set off by a large group of teenagers. And this is where the police response begins to make considerably more sense. Because if officers believe there is an active shooter at a crowded mall, they're going to bring guns. They're going to bring a lot of officers, and they're going to bring them quickly. According to police, officers already at Bayside were having difficulty containing the crowd, so a citywide emergency call was issued. Essentially, everybody who could respond was told to respond. Suddenly, Miami had a wall of police surrounding Bayside Marketplace, and that's the image that would eventually become the centerpiece of the conspiracy theories. Aerial footage showed police vehicles filling the streets. Officers were carrying rifles, roads were closed, people were being pushed away from the area. And for anyone watching those videos without knowing what had happened, it looked absolutely enormous. The official explanation is actually fairly straightforward, and it isn't particularly supernatural. According to Miami police, roughly 50 juveniles were involved in the disturbances. Fireworks were being fired, fights broke out, some looting occurred, people panicked, and the sounds of fireworks were mistaken for gunfire. That triggered the massive police response. 4 teenagers were eventually arrested. According to their arrest reports, the charges included burglary, third-degree grand theft, battery, and resisting arrest without violence. Police also issued a traffic alert warning people to avoid the area because of a large crowd of unruly juveniles. The roads were eventually reopened around 11:30 p.m., so if you stop right there, there is a perfectly ordinary explanation. A bunch of teenagers caused chaos, fireworks sounded like gunshots, people panicked, police responded as though there might be an active shooter. And because the officers initially didn't know exactly what was happening, Miami's police department brought in a massive number of personnel. Case closed. Except, the internet wasn't buying it, because the internet had seen something, or thought it had. And that is where this story takes a hard left turn. One of the most famous pieces of alleged evidence from the incident is a video showing what appears to be a very tall, dark figure near the mall. Depending on who you ask, it's 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall, sometimes even taller. The figure appears to move behind or near police vehicles, and in the low-resolution footage, the shape looks strange, very strange. To some viewers it appears humanoid, but not quite human, and that was all the internet needed. Within days, social media posts were claiming that enormous shadow aliens had been spotted walking around Bayside Marketplace. The story spread rapidly. People began zooming in on the footage, enhancing it, adding arrows, drawing outlines around the figure. And once people were told they were looking at an alien, they started seeing an alien. But there was another possibility, a much more boring possibility, a shadow. Miami police addressed the viral footage directly. Officer Michael Vega explained that the supposed creature was actually the shadow of a person walking. The Miami Police Department later joked about the claims in a social media video, saying there were no aliens at Bayside Marketplace. PolitiFact likewise reviewed the claim and rated the assertion that police had responded to alien creatures as false. And here's where we need to slow down, because saying that the viral alien footage is not evidence of an alien is not the same thing as saying nobody saw anything strange. Those are two different claims, and that's important, because there were people online who claimed they had actually been there. Among the most frequently circulated accounts was a social media poster who claimed to have been at Bayside during the incident. The account described gray humanoid creatures several feet tall. The poster claimed the beings moved strangely, that they appeared to stare at people, that they behaved in ways that seemed physically impossible. Other online accounts described shadowy figures. Some claimed the figures seemed to appear and disappear. Others claimed they moved through spaces in ways that didn't make sense. And then there were even stranger claims. One version of the story described a supposed portal, another involved some sort of device. Other accounts talked about strange lights. And some people claimed that the entire event involved something far beyond a teenage disturbance. But here's the problem. Eyewitness testimony is not automatically evidence of the explanation attached to it. Someone can genuinely believe they saw something extraordinary and still be mistaken about what they saw. Think about what was happening that night. It's dark, it's crowded, people are running, fireworks are exploding, police lights are flashing, people are shouting. Cell phones are recording vertically at night, and human perception under stress is notoriously imperfect. That doesn't mean everyone was lying. It means perception is complicated, and that distinction becomes incredibly important when we examine the stranger accounts. Because the strongest version of the conspiracy isn't simply, "I saw something weird." It's, "Everyone saw something weird and the government covered it up." That's a much bigger claim, and it requires much more evidence. Once the original videos started circulating, the story began mutating. And this is one of the most fascinating parts of the Miami Mall incident, because the event itself happened once, but online, it happened hundreds of times. Every retelling added something. One person said aliens, another said UFO, someone else said a portal, someone else claimed there had been an electromagnetic pulse. Then came stories about cell phones malfunctioning, stories about the internet going down, stories about flights being grounded, stories about police scanners being shut down, stories about helicopters, stories about people having their phones searched, and eventually, stories that police were deleting evidence. The problem is that many of these claims circulated without reliable documentation. One rumor claimed that the Miami airport had been shut down. That wasn't true. Another claimed that the entire area had lost power. Again, there was no solid evidence supporting the claim. Miami police specifically rejected several of the rumors. Local reporting also found no evidence that Miami International Airport had been closed because of the incident. But conspiracy theories don't necessarily require every individual claim to survive scrutiny. They operate through accumulation. One strange thing, then another, and eventually, the collection of strange things becomes its own argument. And then we get to one of the most entertaining theories surrounding the incident, the portal. According to some online accounts, something opened at Bayside, a doorway, a dimensional gateway, a portal, and something supposedly came through it. Now, there is absolutely no verified evidence establishing that a portal opened at Bayside Marketplace. But that didn't stop the theory from spreading. Some people connected alleged lights in the sky to the incident. Others interpreted blurry videos as evidence of dimensional activity. And then someone introduced a completely unrelated video showing a glowing orb. That video was presented online as though it showed an object appearing during the Miami incident, except it didn't. PolitiFact traced the orb video back to material that had been circulating online months before the Miami incident. The footage had been posted as early as May 2023, and therefore could not have been recorded at Bayside on January 1, 2024. This is a perfect example of how internet mysteries evolve. A real event happens, a strange video exists, someone connects the video to the event, people repeat the connection, and eventually, the connection becomes part of the story, even if the original video had nothing to do with the event. And once aliens entered the conversation, another conspiracy theory wasn't far behind: Project Blue Beam. If you've spent any amount of time wandering through the darker corridors of the internet, you've probably heard the name. The theory alleges that governments or powerful organizations could use advanced technology to create enormous artificial phenomena in the sky: holograms, simulated religious events, fake extraterrestrial encounters. The ultimate goal, according to the theory, varies depending on who's telling it. But the broad idea is that humanity could someday be manipulated into believing that an extraordinary event had occurred because the event was manufactured. So when people began claiming that Miami involved strange lights, portals, and extraterrestrials, Project Bluebeam naturally entered the conversation. One viral post even connected the supposed Miami orb footage to Bluebeam. But again, the footage wasn't from Miami. It predated the incident, so the Bluebeam connection rests on a video that was incorrectly attributed to the event. That doesn't prove Project Bluebeam is impossible. it does mean the Miami Mall incident doesn't provide credible evidence for it. Now we arrive at the question that keeps this story alive. Why were there so many police officers? Because this is the part that looks strange. Even when you accept the official explanation, the visual spectacle is enormous. Police cars everywhere, officers carrying rifles, roads blocked, a citywide emergency response. And people naturally ask, would Miami really send that many officers because of fireworks? The answer is, not exactly. They weren't responding to fireworks. They were responding to what they initially believed might be gunfire. That's a critical distinction. The Miami Herald reported that the initial reports indicated possible gunshots. Police then determined that fireworks were responsible for the sounds. And once you understand that, the police response becomes considerably less mysterious. Imagine you're an officer. Your dispatcher tells you there may be an active shooter at a packed downtown shopping complex. You don't know if there are 2 shooters, 10 shooters, 1 shooter. You don't know whether people are injured. You don't know where the shooter is. You don't know if you're walking into an ambush. You're going fast, and you're probably bringing a rifle. That's not evidence of aliens. That's evidence of police responding to incomplete information. This is where I think the Miami Mall story deserves a little more nuance, because there is a temptation to divide everything into 2 camps. Team alien, team police. But reality is usually messier. Some people genuinely reported seeing things they couldn't explain. That doesn't make their interpretation correct, but it doesn't automatically make them liars either. A frightened person in a chaotic environment can see something unusual and accurately report what they perceived, while inaccurately identifying what caused it. That's one of the oldest problems in eyewitness testimony, and Miami was almost a perfect laboratory for that problem. Bright lights, darkness, crowds, running people, fireworks, smoke, police vehicles, flashing emergency lights, long shadows, cell phone cameras, panic, and dozens of competing explanations appearing online simultaneously. Imagine looking across a dark street and seeing a 10-foot figure. Your brain has milliseconds to decide what you're looking at. Human, shadow, pole, person, something else. Then someone next to you screams, "Alien!" Suddenly your brain has a category, and once that category exists, everything starts fitting into it. Then comes the biggest accusation, the cover-up. The theory goes something like this. Police knew the creatures were there. They established a perimeter. They prevented people from leaving. They confiscated phones. They deleted evidence. Authorities shut down communications. The media was told what to report. And then officials released the teenagers and fireworks story to make everyone stop asking questions. It's a compelling narrative. It has all the ingredients of a classic conspiracy, a strange event, an enormous police response, conflicting eyewitness accounts, viral footage, missing information, and authorities saying, "Nothing to see here." But there's a major problem. There is no credible evidence establishing that police confiscated and systematically erased witnesses' footage because it showed aliens. There is no verified evidence establishing that Miami police encountered extraterrestrial beings. There is no reliable evidence demonstrating that flights were grounded because of the incident. And there is no verified evidence of a portal. The strongest documented evidence points toward a chaotic disturbance involving juveniles, fireworks, fights, reports of possible gunfire, and a large police response. And that doesn't make the story boring. It makes it interesting in a completely different way. Because now the mystery isn't, were aliens at the mall? The mystery becomes, how did a fairly ordinary police incident become one of the internet's most bizarre extraterrestrial stories? And this might be the real Stranger Things moment. because information vacuums are dangerous things. When something dramatic happens and authorities don't immediately explain everything, people fill the silence. That's human nature. On January 1st, people saw police. They saw chaos. They heard explosions. They saw people running. They saw flashing lights. They saw shadows. But they didn't necessarily know why. And when people don't know, they speculate. Then somebody posts a theory. Someone else posts a video. Someone adds a dramatic caption. Then somebody else claims they have an insider. Then another person says, "My friend was there." Then, "My uncle is a cop." Then, "I know someone who works at the airport." And suddenly, a story has been created. Not necessarily intentionally, not necessarily maliciously, just organically. The internet becomes a giant game of telephone. Except every person in the telephone chain can add video, music, screenshots, arrows, captions, and dramatic narration. And by the time the story reaches the millionth viewer, the original event may barely resemble the story being told. Let's put everything on the table. Fact number 1. There was a real incident at Bayside Marketplace on January 1, 2024. Fact number 2. A large group of juveniles was involved in fights and disorder. Fact number 3. Fireworks were being set off. Fact number 4. People reported what they believed were gunshots. Fact number 5. Miami police responded with a very large number of officers. Fact number 6. The department issued a citywide emergency response because officers initially had difficulty controlling the situation. Fact number 7. 4 teenagers were arrested. Fact number 8. Police publicly denied that aliens, UFOs, or extraterrestrials were involved. Now, the claims: 8 to 10-foot shadow beings, portals, aliens, electromagnetic interference, phone confiscation, government cover-up, missing footage. These remain allegations, and some of the specific evidence used to support them has been shown to be misleading or unrelated to Miami. The alleged orb footage, for example, existed online before the incident. The famous alien figure has been explained by police as a person's shadow. So if we're asking what is most strongly supported by the available evidence, the answer is pretty clear. There is no reliable evidence that aliens invaded Bayside Marketplace. But that doesn't mean every question surrounding the event is stupid, because here's the strange thing. The Miami Mall incident doesn't need aliens to be fascinating. Think about what actually happened. On New Year's Day, a group of teenagers caused a disturbance. Fireworks sounded like gunshots. People panicked. Police flooded the area. And then the internet transformed that chaos into an extraterrestrial encounter. Within days, people were talking about shadow beings, portals, government cover-ups, Project Bluebeam, and 10-foot aliens wandering through a shopping mall in Miami. It's a perfect example of how modern mysteries are born, not in secret government laboratories, not necessarily in UFO crash sites, but in the gap between what happened and what people think happened. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Bayside. We live in an age where everyone carries a camera. Everyone has a broadcasting platform. Everyone can become a witness. Everyone can become a detective. And everyone can become a storyteller. But those things are not the same. A video isn't automatically proof. An eyewitness isn't automatically correct. A police statement isn't automatically the whole story. And a conspiracy theory isn't automatically false simply because it's strange. The trick is knowing which parts we actually know, which parts we don't, and which parts are nothing more than stories growing in the darkness. As for Miami, the official record gives us teenagers, fireworks, fights, possible looting, panic, and a police response triggered by reports of gunfire. The conspiracy version gives us something much bigger: creatures, portals, UFOs, government suppression, and perhaps an encounter that authorities desperately wanted buried. But until something more substantial emerges, the evidence doesn't take us there. And maybe that's what makes the Miami Mall incident so perfect for Stranger Things. Because the weirdest thing that happened that night might not have been something that came through a portal. It might have been what happened after everyone went home. A real event became a mystery. The mystery became a theory. The theory became a viral story. And the viral story became something almost impossible to kill. So the next time you see a blurry video online of something enormous standing in the darkness, before you ask, "What is that?" ask a more important question: where did this video come from? Because sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes the shadow is the monster. I'm Mortimer. This is Stranger Things. And I'll see you on the other side of the strange.